So in today's video, and by popular demand, I'm going to talk about a bar raiser. A bar raiser is someone, who is delegated to supervise the interviewing process and to actually be part of the on-site interviews in order to ensure that the candidate applying for that specific role is at least as good as 50% of the existing employees in the respective companies. And I'm quoting here from Amazon's definition of a bar raiser, which is actually quite a representative one from my experience. So this would be the definition of who a bar raiser is. Now, the second point I wanted to touch upon here is how do you spot a bar raiser during the on-site interview? Well, my experience has shown, people telling me about their experience in their job interviews are telling me that they are pretty easy to spot. However, it's not always the case. So as a pretty standard rule here, how do you spot a bar raiser? It's someone who's not working in the department that you're applying for a job right there. So it's someone outside of that specific business unit. The reason being for this is because they want to spot some other elements, some other core competencies that might make you an even better candidate for that specific role. And one more note here is that the bar raiser is very much involved in the qualitative aspect of the interviewing process. Number 3 here, what are bar raisers looking for? So usually they will have an interview during 1 hour of that on-site interview. So what are they looking for? And actually, with the risk of being a bit generic here and to quote from an Amazon bar raiser, they are looking for 3 things. They are looking for resourcefulness, and I know it sounds very generic, but trust me when I tell you that energy sells in any interview. So resourcefulness is more like energy, and you should tell them, hey, I have what it takes to get the job done. And this is not as easy as I guarantee 90% of the people watching this video think it is. The second thing they are looking for in candidates is whether they could be role models. Could you be a role model inside the company that you're applying for? If yes, then I'm sure that your chances to get a job very much increase, and especially for high-performing companies. And the third, and the most important, if you ask me, it's not being afraid to fail. And this actually brings me to the next point of this video. Okay, but what types of questions do they ask you during an interview? So let's think about it. People who are not afraid to fail mean that are somewhat comfortable talking about failure, right? So they would ask you questions about failure and about taking risk. Risk not necessarily in the context of a failure, but you know what I mean. So to give some examples here of what are some questions that they might ask you. Well, for failure, tell me about the time when you failed to meet a deadline, or tell me about the time when you made the wrong judgment call and this eventually resulted in some quantifiable failure or some damage. Then these failures must be quantifiable. If you want, go check my other videos because I cover this in very much detail. Now, when it comes to risk, tell me about the time when you took a significant risk is the most common question related to risk. Or give me an example of a time when you've made a calculated risk in a project where speed was essential. Or tell me about the time when you encouraged someone on your team to take on a big risk. Again, these are all questions related with risk. So these are the types of questions they might ask. Keep in mind, as I said throughout this video, the bar raiser is someone who designs the hiring process, who has influence on what types of principles, in the case of Amazon, what types of principles they'll be focusing on for the specific role. But needless to say, they have the freedom to choose the types of questions that they're going to ask you during the interview, including the follow-up questions. So finally, what are some best practices when it comes to dealing with bar raisers? From my from the feedback that I receive from you, I can tell you that more often than not, people block when dealing with bar raisers, and people block after getting asked questions about failure, because it's not natural to talk about failures no matter how much you enjoy failing. I can tell from my experiences as well. What else is very interesting when dealing with a bar raiser? Well, more often than not, they are someone who've been working there for a certain period of time. There is a bar raiser program, so not anyone can be a bar raiser in this hiring process. So you can. I believe it's obvious that they are someone that command a bit more formal. I mean, they are someone with whom you should be a bit more formal, as when compared to other people interviewing you, other people being people who you're going to be working with on your given team. So if you're going to be interviewed with someone outside that team and someone who's been a long-term Amazonian, for example, that person will somewhat command more respect and won't be necessarily as friendly as the others. So what do you do in these situations? Well, you mirror their style to a certain extent. So you are a bit more skeptical. Why not? Because if they're a bar raiser, it means they are mean to ask you difficult questions. So if they ask you difficult questions, you listen to them much better and you ask follow-up questions. And you don't get blocked if you ask a question for which you don't have an answer. So these would be some of the main things that I believe would be the most interesting while dealing with these bar raisers. And hopefully you found this information useful. And if you do want to support this channel, please feel free to share your interview outcomes in the comment sections of the videos. And thank you very much for watching.